Hi, everybody, and welcome. Let's wait for another minute or two. Exciting to have everyone here. We have loads of people registered from all the different time zones. Appreciate you all making the time, and hopefully, this is going to be interesting and useful. So let's give it another minute and then we can get started. Oh, hi, Andrew. I'm also in London right now. It's super hot, surprisingly super hot. So let's see if I don't faint somewhere in the process of giving this presentation. In the meantime, I'm going to start sharing my screen. Yeah, okay, fair enough. You know what? Obviously, if you're from Dubai, there is no comparison to London. Okay. Here we go. Awesome. Okay, 2 minutes passed. So I suggest we get started. Just a quick note, there is loads and loads of material that we have to cover. So I'm going to try to run fairly fast through it. If you have any questions, just drop them in chat and we'll address them all towards the end. The recording will be available as well. So if you want to go through it another time, we'll share that after the presentation as well. And I will go into the present mode, so I'm not going to be seeing the questions, but again, we're going to address those at the end of the presentation. So let's dive in. 2025 Pitch Deck Playbook, the rules of storytelling. Essentially, the whole purpose of today is to share with you what kind of decks work, what kind of decks don't work, based on, well, in all honesty, over 1,000 decks we've seen over the past year alone. Now, who am I and why am I talking on this topic? I've spent the last 11, well, now almost 12 years in the VC space, so over 700 different rounds, helped companies raise over 3 billion plus, probably around 300 million in the past 6 months. I've also been in your shoes, building a startup shoes, and ex-COO of Clevo, and that was a AI retail startup that got to Series B stage. We went through all the pains, building a startup, getting to product market fit, losing product market fit, fundraising, and eventually selling to a private equity in the beginning of this year. So again, I know what you're going through. I know what you're going through, and hopefully what we share today is going to be helpful. By the way, this is our third series, so we call it Wave Up Academy. I know most of the questions people typically have is around how to fundraise, where to find money, how can you find investors, what to tell them. So we've actually covered all of that in the first webinar, which we've called Rules of Fundraising, around how to raise a VC round in 2025. And then we had a second webinar on rules of surviving, and that's around specifically around raising Series A, the valuations, the different sectors, the kind of metrics investors look for, and also how to build a financial model and forecast. So if any of those are of interest, reach out. Okay, let's dive in. Why do we care about pitch decks in 2025? Very simply, I think you've probably seen the stats multiple times. VCs spend less than 2 minutes reviewing your deck. I think we kind of know that, but also if you let it sink in, it's less time that you'd spend brushing your teeth. So essentially in the time, it takes 1.5 minutes to check WhatsApp notifications, around 2 minutes to brush your teeth, and the same amount of time an investor spends reviewing your pitch deck and deciding if they're going to give you money or not. That's almost the same as like microwaving your meal, waiting for your coffee to brew. So this also means that short attention span, only 1 in 20 decks sent cold is going to get a cold meeting. And most investors decide in under 4 slides whether they want to talk to you or not. So if you pause there for a second, visualize your deck. I'm quite sure you've probably done a deck at some point in the past. And try to assess truthfully. If the investor spends less than 2 minutes on your deck and potentially looks through only 4 to 6 slides, would your deck be the one? Would you get a call back and be, look, we want to invest? If yes, then that's awesome. If not, or if you suspect that's a no, or if you want to learn if that would be a no, then this is what this webinar is for. And that's essentially what we're going to cover today. In a nutshell, before we get to all of the slide examples, and generally the idea today is essentially review together over 100 different slides, what works for them, what doesn't work. I do have to set the record straight. It's super difficult to raise funding in 2025. There are multiple different reasons for it. Again, we've covered it before in different webinar, but the result of it is the competition is up. There's significantly more companies trying to fundraise than before. Investors are window shopping more than ever before. And that means they're basically reviewing the decks, but at the same time, global early stage fundraising trends flat. And I've just spoken to one of the investors today. They used to be super active, and over the past year, they barely made 2 deals. So investors are investing same or less, but the amount of companies looking for funding is significantly more. And essentially, in this environment, the key question is, how do you get to be the one company that lends that investor attention? The many different things are responsible for that, but really just one. It's the story. It's the story that you're telling. And on purpose, I'm not using the word pitch deck because it has nothing to do with the slides. It's more around the narrative. Why should they give money to you? Why you're going to be the one who's going to win, lead the category, transform this money into investor returns. Generally, the fundamentals of a good story are well known, and they aren't changed, I think, for the past 10, 20, maybe 50 years, right? You have to show that you have a large pain, supported with real life evidence. You have to present a solution that's a painkiller. You have to show that the addressable opportunity is large. Ideally, it's also greenfield. There is practically no one there. You have to focus on your traction slides, and especially lately, that's probably a key part of your story. You have to prove your value proposition. You have to show that the moment to win in the market is now. You need to prove your model is scalable and efficient, that your go-to-market motion is unique, all of that amazing team, yada, 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 yada. But while that stayed the same, the way you tell the story has changed. And I can very confidently say that I think the old Pitch Deck Playbook is dead. So this green thing, and maybe you've seen it, right? Like the most commonly used template, I think, in the world, Sequoia, capital template that they've put together, very simple kind of problem solution, etc., that everyone has used. But the question is, how do you stand out in the ocean of these pitch decks if everyone uses the same standardized structure and guidelines? And whenever I try to tell this to some of the founders, one of the questions I get is, it worked for Airbnb and Uber, why wouldn't it work for me? There are 3 reasons for that. One, there are significantly more companies raising today. There is more decks, there is more competition, there is more pressure to prep and ship in front of investors something good. There is also an understanding that now there is all these amazing AI tools and other stuff. And I think suboptimal decks are tolerated much less. 2, and kind of part of that as well, in this deck process, what investors are looking for is a founder that can tell a story. And why is because they proxy your ability to tell the story to how successful you're going to be in when you are trying to pitch the same story to your employees, when you're trying to pitch the same story to your customers. So essentially, they're using this first pitching experience and pitch deck as a proxy for how successful you might be later on in your go-to-market. As a second bit, like getting finance generally up till 2021 has been very different and much easier. Investors are extremely picky today, I'd say. And then I have to say that this template, a very simple problem solution template, still works extremely well for companies that have incredible team and or incredible traction. So if you went from a 0 to 10 million ARR in the course of 6 months, or if you have a team that did previous 2 exits, you can do your pitch deck on a napkin and you would easily get funded. You probably wouldn't need a pitch deck altogether. However, for everyone else, you still need to sweat and invest more in the deck and the story. And also the bar is just up, right? Like this is a slide from Facebook deck, from Mint deck, from Airbnb deck. It's different today. The game has changed. So what does work in 2025? Counterintuitive, but the key rule is not listening to any rules. I've heard it all, in all honesty. Some people say you have to start with the problem. Some people say you have to start with the team. Some people have say you have to start with why now. Some investors say, I want to see the financials. Other people say, skip the financials. I don't care. It's never going to come true anyways. Some people say, I want to see the valuation. Others say, that's stupid, including valuation. Some people say the deck should be a maximum of 10 slides. They should be super visual. Others say, I don't get anything based on this deck. I want to see more detail. I've heard focus on secret sauce. And then immediately when doing that slide, I've heard from investor, we hate the word secret sauce because that's just completely overhyped. So your deck is never going to appeal to anyone. You have to accept that. You have to live with that. Because the only person the deck has to appeal to begin with, is yourself. Every story and every company is different. So the most important thing to remember when building your deck is you have to tell your story and you have to lead with your unfair advantage. The importance of telling your story, first and foremost, is just going to be more natural to you. Now, the story does have to be good. Get me right? It's not like tell your crappy story. The story has to be extremely good. But the order of slides, what you put on them, how much text is there, that's up to you. Because if the story is powerful and if the story is compelling, it's going to convert. Now, what do I mean when I say you have to lead with your unfair advantage? If your team is amazing and you have people with previous exits, always open with a team slide. If you have strong founder market fit, so you've experienced the problem yourself, open with a story slide. We worked with a founder who built an incredible device for his spine. And the reason he was able to do that is because he broke his spine and he didn't have a solution. And then his wife had issues with her lower back and his mother had issues, etc. So that was a very strong opening story that explained why he ventured in that market. It made for a great opening slide. If your traction is amazing, open with a traction slide. If there is nothing around team or traction, start with a really strong why now. Maybe start with a vision, get people excited about that. Otherwise, you can start with a classic problem solution. That's fine too. But if you have something amazing, if you have something that you think gives you an unfair competitive advantage, put it up front. Because if you put it towards the end, there is a chance investor is never going to get there. So you need to make sure you open with a strong thing. This is how it might look in practice, right? If you have a team, and we've sanitized a lot of these slides due to obvious reasons, but this was a team that has built something incredible at Google. So if you have that, obviously you put it up. We've worked with a company that got to 6 million ARR in 8 months. That's incredible with a 3-person team. So literally, we've actually just, put it on your cover slide. Why not? If you have more of an amazing numbers, you can make a great executive summary slide that's just very visual. We're a first mover in X, and these are, 4 bold numbers. We are profitable. We've already got to revenue. We're bootstrapped. We have X amount of projects. If you don't have any of that, you can just open with why now. This is from a deck that successfully raised 4.5 million in wellness space. The quote is actually from McKinsey. In this case, our designers over sanitized it. But right, it just says, we're witnessing one of the most profound demographic shifts in human history. The quote from McKinsey, by 2040, those older than 60 will more than double. And then you get to why we're building what we're building. Another way to think about it is, if you think about meeting your future partner and imagine that you're in a speed dating event and you have just a few minutes to impress them, you wouldn't start by telling, I was born in 1990 and this is when I went to college too. And then you think, somewhere towards the end, I'm going to have all of these amazing details, because you just don't have time. And because there are 40 other people right there. And at any given moment, they might make a better impression on your partner. And that's it. That's going to be the end, right? You only got one chance. So if that's the case, you'd probably think about giving the most impressive, genuine, authentic introduction of yourself possible. I think the pitch deck is the same. You want to give the most authentic, compelling, attractive story about your business as fast as possible to get people to absolutely love you. What are the fundamentals of some of that good story? it flows naturally. So again, don't listen to somebody who says this slide should come here and this slide should come here. It needs to be natural. It has to be comfortable and authentic to tell. Similar to a good movie, you have to kind of think about a little bit about suspense, a level of interest rising with each slide, or at least not dropping. So every slide needs to sell, right? So every slide needs to have one message and every slide needs to sell something. So if it's a slide that purely has a, like, let's say, how it works chart and has a lot of arrows and boxes, ask yourself, do I actually really need the slide? If you really need that slide, then turn it into a slide that sells. Instead of just having a process chart, you can say, the whole process is done in 2 minutes versus 1 hour by the legacy players. Or, underpinning all of this is proprietary LLM, and, we generate loads of data, whatever else is there. There's always something you can add to the slide to make sure that that sells. Your deck, if it's a good deck, needs to have at least 1+ aha moments. And you have to think about this in advance. At which point would investor pause and think, wow, okay, that's really cool. Very often that can be around your go-to-market strategy and your network effects. Sometimes it's around your execution. Sometimes it's around the demo that you show. But whatever that is, look at and think about where those aha moments are going to be. I think the most underrated element of a good pitch deck has to do nothing with slides. It has to be, your deck needs to have energy. And the person who's pitching it needs to have this amazing energy and big vision and clarity around the execution details and numbers, right? If you're literally just reading from the slides, I've seen that a lot, like, we're building this and this and this, and it's going to be a beautiful, amazing part. Like, it needs to flow, right? You need to be excited about what you're building. You need to be excited about solving the problem for the customer. And a good sign of that is when you're going to end your pitch, you would see others being excited. You would see others asking questions as well. How much is too much, right? So again, very often I get feedback, this is too wordy. And then very often I get feedback, this is not enough. So a slide on the left, a tad wordy. It's good if you're pitching to all the different investor types. So let's say you're pitching to VC, but also private equity, family offices, and you want to make sure the information is kind of there. It also works well for email, right? Because if you're sending the deck, you need to make sure whoever gets the deck understand the messages really well. In the same way, if you kind of pitched it to someone junior inside the firm and then they need to pass the deck along, again, it works if the deck has the text. However, you need to make sure that deck is still readable and understandable in under, let's say, 2-3 seconds, right? So you look at the slide and you understand really clearly what the message of the slide is, even if it's a little bit on the wordier slide. And then there is a format of the decks, like the slide on the right, where you just say, a bubble has been forming, right? And there is 1,000 other messages, why the bubble, why it's important, what kind of a bubble is it? But typically that's delivered more in a verbal narrative. And it works really well for visionary founders who can tell a compelling story, right? AKA Steve Jobs and Apple. But it doesn't necessarily work when you're sending the deck via email. So ideally, I think you have to balance those two things, making sure, most importantly, that the slide tells a story. Remember that your deck is not supposed to answer every question one might have. I think this is the most common misconception. People want to put everything down. If an investor has a question, you want to know that everything is answered. But the deck is not meant for that. And it's not your CV either. The only job of your deck is to land you the next meeting or the next conversation. So in essence, it's like a Tinder profile with the primary goal of attracting and converting interest. And that's how you can think about it. So before we dive into how to, let me make a quick pause, because one of my colleagues is telling me that my face is very big and the deck is very small, and I'm going to try to fix that. So let's see what we can do here. Just give me a second. Apologies, I'm back. I was kicked out of this meeting. So let me try again. Okay. Not sure how to pin it. So someone on my team, guys, if you figure it out, you can try to do that. So in the meantime, I'm just going to continue presenting. Going to go into the full deck mode. Okay, awesome. So how to? I think a couple of important things. A, the message needs to be clear in under 20 seconds. So that's what we talked about, right? And it helps when the title is descriptive versus generic problem. One slide, one message with some data to support. Every slide supports the story. So you need to have that overall red thread through the deck and sells by us. The design shouldn't supposed to distract from the message, just needs to be clean and readable. I really recommend for anyone who's building their own decks to read the book, which is called Smart Brevity. It's very short, but it has amazing principles that allow you to write in a more powerful way. For example, instead of writing this, form the strong pipeline for the next 12 months, it keeps growing, you can just say a growing revenue pipeline. It seems very intuitive, but not everyone uses it. Generally, I'd say once you're done with the deck, go through it. You can always cut 25 to 30% of the deck without losing any important content. And this is a good example with the titles, right? You can just say the market, but you can say we will rapidly scale verticals, expand our TAM to 200 billion plus, and it's going to be better in terms of readability for the investor. So now that we kind of set some base rules, let's get practical. The goal is in the next probably 30 minutes to go through 100 examples of different slides, and hopefully you don't get too tired, and see how what works, what doesn't work, and which kind of slides raise funding. So let's start with the classical problem slide. So what kind of things a good problem slide has? I think this is fairly intuitive, but the problem needs to be as strong as possible, right? AKA your painkiller. Ideally, the problem has to be quantified. The problem has to be focused on one ICP. So some of the worst problem slides go, okay, the customer has a problem, the brands have a problem, the government has a problem, everyone has a problem. I'm going to solve this for everybody. In rare cases, you might, but really investors are looking to see if you're addressing one ICP in a really good way. You want to know that the problem is large and compelling. You want to explain why no one solves it today. And these are some of examples of slides that basically don't really work, right? So this slide, formatting aside, is just quite wordy, doesn't have any data, and they all come from real decks, right? This slide has a visual, but doesn't really have, and again, if you're an investor and you spend 2 seconds in it, you wouldn't even know what the problem is because there is just text. This slide has a good kind of part of the problem, but then it also mixes in size of the opportunity, which doesn't actually make sense. This slide just have everything pretty much in it. That doesn't work either. So good example of a slide where people try to explain everything. And again, it doesn't work. It's not readable. And some examples of slide that work. So job market is inefficient, just a good title, right? You don't necessarily have to read anything else. You see businesses struggle, talent struggles, very clear, very visual. So I'd move on. A good example, again, of the slide that basically has a visual representation and this one big fact. 70% more samples are required to generate results. This slide is from the deck that ended up raising 5 million in funding from investors. And it's a little bit on the wordier side, but again, the message works, right? So you show that to create a video game, you need an army of professionals, you need pricey professional tools, you need multiple iterations, and that means the budgets are extremely high and you need a very specialized skill set. This slide works because it's quantified and it's very easy to read, right? So like 2 out of 3 global population lack meaningful access to justice. 1 billion people, so you also quantify the opportunity immediately on the right. 80 billion global energy drink market is stuck in the past. Again, you kind of quantify size of opportunity and you quantify the problem. This is from the deck that ended up raising 60 million. And actually, funny enough, I feel the older is the stage of the company, so Series B, Series C, the more clear and concise the decks are. So even if you're in pre-seed and seed, that's just something to try to achieve. Employee financial security costs 620 billion annually. And then you have, 3 core facts. This is for a real estate segment, and it looks complex, but essentially it just shows that the process is outdated, fragmented, and extremely siloed. So you have the visualization on the left, and then you have the problem on the right. This one doesn't actually focus. So there was a separate problem slide, but an important part of the problem very often is why solutions today don't work. So in this case, right, this is a slide that shows solutions are single point, disjointed, expensive, and you can see all of these disconnected systems. You can see the cost of those systems, and that's why the slide works well. I can also show you the full flow of that. Sometimes the problem slide is not one slide, but ends up being 3 slides. So in this case, this is a deck for an AI sales SDR that are very popular these days, and that's a pre-seed deck. And right, we say message number 1, outbound sales is not dead, but it's getting harder because most of the time is spent on prospecting tasks that can be automated. Message number 2 is existing solutions don't work for 90% of the companies. Why? Because there's human SDRs that just costly and manual. There is SaaS automation where you have to duct tape all the tools. And then there is the existing AI solutions, but they don't work. And as a result, your message number 3, both companies and prospects are tired. AI is killing outbound. And there are some real life examples of customer reviews on the right. And then you get to the solution. Can it all be packed in one slide? Probably it can. If for your story, it's important to tell some of those messages separately, then you can use more slides for that as well. Presenting a solution. So how do you present a solution and what to focus on? I think the key was the solution. It has to be easy to understand in under 5 seconds. And it has to be very clear which problem you're solving. Solution seems such an easy slide, but it's also the one that somehow people get massively wrong. And one of the core things that I see that people get wrong is either you do a solution that's all in one, and some solutions are truly all in one. But generally, a lot of investors want to see that your solution is focused, that you're solving a pain for a particular audience, and they're solving that pain really well. And especially in pre-seed/seed stage, they want to know that you're starting with a very clear use case that you're solving really well, 10x better than anyone else. And then from there, you're going to build up. So all the slides that instantly go, our solution is end-to-end platform for XYI, they can be a little bit challenging with investors. Even worse is when you have confusing positioning. So I think, especially now with AI, the past maybe 20 decks that I've seen, they all confuse this multiple different wordings, right? So you start the deck and you say, we're building a sales AI agent. And then you say, actually, it's an app, or maybe it's a marketplace, or maybe it's an operating system, or maybe it's a platform, or maybe it's an infrastructure layer. Settle on what are you telling, because for you, it might seem intuitive, but for someone who's going through this deck really fast and is going to spend 2 minutes on it, it's going to be extremely confusing. It needs to be clear. What is that you're actually building? And the solution needs to be memorable and impressive. Ideally, there's going to be a visual there as well. I think, again, key mistake, 80% of the decks don't actually state what the company does in slide 1. You might think that you say what the company does, but that's not really true. So a good test is show that one slide to 5 different people, ideally those who are, have nothing to do with what you're doing, and ask them if they understand it, or ask them to tell you how they understand it. And if those people are universal in terms of their kind of feedback and it matches what you do, great. For 90% of the company, it wouldn't. Obviously, bad example, but good example in one way. Solution slide where you say proprietary tech, pop-up metaverse, okay, in a Singapore first patented invention, okay, and then you say hardware, software, and bus brands, 360 facial, O2O data integration. Like, that's a solution slide, right? It's super difficult to understand what this actually is. Here, it's easy to understand, but it's not specific because it goes, through the prism of Sutsu, art of war, leveraging whatever, invest in greatest asset people. You don't even know what is it about. The solution has to be clear. So in this case, we're end-to-end B2B healthcare marketplace that connects pharmacies with healthcare suppliers instantly and at the lower cost. And ideally, if you can bake into this slide either traction or value proposition, you're going to win big, right? So this is a good example from Fairwill. Fairwill makes death easier. It's all in one, great experience, great value. An example of a very visual slide rather than a wordy one. This is example from a drink brand, right? We've developed a revolutionary energy drink, and then you bake in value proposition. 40x higher juice content, 2x lower caffeine, 2x lower sugar. This is a very easy way, but also an interesting one from Luco, which basically presents the core use case rather than presenting a solution. So it doesn't say we're a platform or an app. It just says, in short, in 2 minutes, instead of lengthy forms, and then you see what we don't do, right? We don't use external databases to use it. We deliver a seamless subscription. End-to-end platform for residential pre-construction. AI-first platform for services under one roof, making the process faster, simpler, more efficient. And again, value proposition is baked in. So 2x faster design approvals, 3x faster project kickoff, 55% faster permitting, no more manual work. This is from 11x. They raised, what was it? I think a 70 billion Series B. Like this was their deck. Very simple, right? Like digital workers work 24/7, automate jobs, run on autopilot, get smarter with time. Easy to understand, visual, instantly it clicks. Yes, great. And then, follow on a value proposition slide. The solution is 10x faster, better, cheaper than a human SDR, and you have actual visual graphs to show that. Again, similar, a solution, faster, cheaper, better, and this is what we do. Remember, this is also translates into your cover slide. So this is an example of a cover slide from a project that we've seen last week, where fiat meets crypto unified. We find solutions where others see obstacles. You wouldn't know what the solution is. Your cover need, like, if I'm an investor, I want to look at this and I want to know, is this a neobank? Is this an app? Is this a payment system? I want to just instantly understand what is it about, because otherwise it's extremely difficult to also take in the problem, the solution, because you don't have enough context. So make sure that that solution slide translates into other slides, and particularly translates into your opening slide. A question that comes together with the solution slide is product slide dead, because less and less people use product slides. And I think the general shift for 2021 to 2025 is for people to use significantly more slides that have to do with execution, with business model, with your go-to-market strategy, and significantly less with the technology. Why is it? Well, basically, it's because of this. The sad truth is, in the current environment, very few investors care about the product, because the product and tech are getting more and more commoditized with AI. We're seeing cases where one can copy in its entirety your business in under 2 weeks. And if that's the case, there is very little defensibility in the product that you're building. So generally, more and more successful decks focus less on the product and instead focus the second part of that deck on the execution, the traction, the result, the strategy, and the GTM. If you choose to have a product slide, and that's absolutely fine, and many times it's justified, make sure it's not just a laundry list of features. Make sure it doesn't have loads of jargon. Make sure you don't have these multiple product slides. I think dedicate this slide to either what you do or why what you do is 10x better, or why the process is 10x better, or why the tech is really defensible. And sometimes even a better idea, especially for businesses that are super complex, especially if you're struggling to explain what you do and people still don't get it in one slide because what you're building is complex, build an awesome demo slide instead. Have a demo video of a couple of minutes that shows what you're doing. There are actually decks and businesses that successfully raced with demo better than they did with the deck, and sometimes they're justified. The market slide. I think one of the key issues generally with the market slide is, well, they look like this. A lot of them look like this. Loads of data and random numbers, and you feel like all of that data is really good, so you want to put it on the slide. And then the question comes up, how, what's the market size? How do I find what the market size is? And what most people do is they go to ChatGPT or they go to Google and they say, well, give me the market size for real estate AI solutions, or give me the market size for your hardware in sector X. And then you get all of these reports like marketresearch.com or review something like this or grant something like this. And they give you confusing numbers. And you take one of those numbers and you slap it on your deck and you consider it done. That's what you're not supposed to do. Key reason is I've seen how some of these reports are calculated, and it's completely wrong, right? You don't know what the underlying assumptions are. You don't know how these reports calculate the data. Your market sizing always, ideally, needs to be bottom up. And that bottom up market sizing needs to be tied to your ICP, ideal customer persona, and your market realities. And once you've completed your market sizing and you've calculated your total addressable market, serviceable addressable market, obtainable market, you can quickly look into the overall market size figures and see, does it look correct? Do you think that's right? For example, if your serviceable obtainable market is less than 1 billion, normally that means the market is too small. You probably have to extend it because investors are not going to be interested. If you simply say our serviceable obtainable market is 1% of SAM, that's bad. It's a very example of a very bad slide. You also need to make sure that your market size gives you a clear path to 100 million to 5 million in revenue, right? So again, so if your obtainable market is 50 million, that's not true. It doesn't give you a path to 100 million to 500 million in revenue. And that means for a lot of investors, this is not going to be interesting enough. So how do good market size slides look like? This is not a bad market slide. You know, it essentially shows you that the company today has 7 logos, and when they go to 50 logos, they're going to be at 100 million in revenue. So that has showed your path to 100 million in revenue. And then the path to 100 billion in revenue is essentially 250 logos, which is less than 1% of the market in adjacent products like financial. That's a good example. That's your very classical example. This is from the deck that ended up raising 4 million in pre-seed. And here, it's a very good example of the bottom-up market sizing, right? So we take an overall number of independent B2B sales professionals in our target industries, and we multiply it by what we're going to charge them per seat per month today. For our serviceable addressable market, we're looking at the same but slightly wider audience. So we're looking at all the independent sales professionals in US, and we multiply it for what we're going to charge them tomorrow as we're going to expand the feature suite. And for our TAM, we're essentially taking even slightly broader audience and then the price that we would charge them for a full suite. This is a similar but different example. Again, so this is from the deck that raised 60 million. And here the idea is to say that the TAM is large and it's unpenetrated. So we say the TAM is 71 billion. It's less than 1% penetrated. And actually, the employees that we have registered today already represent 0.26% of the TAM. So we can be massive. And we're gaining market share. So we'll lose then 1% of the deals to competition. We win over 30%. Another example of bottom-up opportunity that's also coupled with why now. So on the left, you kind of have, this is our immediate opportunity, this is our expansion opportunity, and then this is why now and a couple of market stats. That's also a way to do it. Final one, again, kind of your TAM, SAM, SOM, but also getting to 150 million ARR will only require 3% of the SOM. So another good example. If you're looking into the competition, I think the key around presenting the competition slides, ideally, try to do it in a very thoughtful way. So if you're doing it in a table format, right, maybe this one, or you have your classic ticks and crosses, there is nothing wrong with that. However, the issue is that typically is that features are very easy to replicate. So you're not presenting a true, competitive mode. So for example, in this case, if you look, cash on delivery, well, everyone does yes. Generally, I'm not sure why would you put something if all of it is yes, including yourself. But, imagine that others have a no. Cash on delivery is something very easy to integrate. So very often when I see this feature by feature comparison, for investors, it doesn't work because everything it tells you is that anyone who has 500,000 or an extra engineer can outcompete you on that. The purpose of your competition slide that typically, right, follows, this is the market and this is how we plan to win in the market, is to present your strategy, show your defendable niche, show how you're going to outcompete. This is a good way from a company that ended up raising, I think, 20 million, right? Like, we're defining a category. Here is an ROI, here is ease of use, here is our competition, this is where we are. And then, compared to, let's say, AI SDRs, this is how we win. Compared to Clay, this is how we win. Compared to human SDRs, this is how we win. Alternative is, again, 2x2. In this case, has different axes, but on the right, you talk about your competitive moat and defensibility and how essentially you're going to win. So that was part on the market. Now, with problem solution, market out of the way, really we get to that second part, which I've mentioned before, and that's around execution. And normally this is the part. So your traction slide is what's going to make or break your pitch deck. It gets the most intention time per page, 23% more than other slides. And it's the one slide that costs most if done wrong. And it's also the one slide that people get really, really wrong. Understandably, I think in a lot of the pre-seed/seed stages, there's just very little you can put down there. So I hear all the time, well, what do we put down there? We don't have anything. We haven't launched yet. So I'll walk you through some examples of what we can do in those kind of situations. But generally, your traction slide cheat sheet looks the following. Your slide needs to prove quality plus speed of execution and potential product market fit, either existing product market fit or the fact that the problem and the solution is validated and most likely going to reach product market fit. So for post-revenue companies, it means what you need to show is you need to show track record of growth, you need to show customer love as evident in usage or retention, and you need to show efficiency of what you're doing, efficiency of your go-to-market, of your business model. That's typically evident in things like LTV CAC, some channel metrics, burn multiple, etc. For pre-revenue companies, it can be customer validation, can be significant milestones, can be your growing wait list, can be your pipeline, can be your letters of intent, can be anything else you can think of, presented in the most impressive way. So let's quickly go through it. So obviously, this is not a great example of a traction roadmap because that's actually, a future traction. So that doesn't really work. This is not a great traction either, right? Like business plan ready, website content ready, sales marketing plan ready. Like no one cares. Product pre-MVP ready, that's pretty good. But if you have those bullets, try to sell them. So for example, if you have nothing else, but you've developed MVP fast, the only thing you can put here is MVP developed in less than 90 days, validated it with 90 customers, assembled a team plus mentors, with X experience. Make it pop, make it really interesting, make it exciting, because I think everyone agrees this is not exciting. And somehow all the traction slides look like that. This is similar. It's a little bit better, right? But if I'm an investor, I look at it, it's like, okay, capital and development, market validation, near-term milestones. So you raise the seed and you have phase 1 MVP launching, but haven't launched yet. And you've spoken with some industry leaders, you don't know whom. And then in the future, you plan to launch a tokenization platform. The way that we've ended up turning this around was, okay, develop an MVP in whatever months, super fast. We're executing fast. We raised the initial capital from some of the great market players. Where now, instead of saying we're talking with industry leaders, we're actually saying we have a pipeline of 9, 10, 12 industry leaders, including number one company in this space, or one of the 3 top companies in this space. And that's going to translate if converted into a pipeline of X dollars, for example. So small little things make a lot of difference. And obviously, if you have already launched, this is an example of a great slide where you can say, look, this is growing. You have this hockey stick growth that people like. Again, look, it's working. Hockey stick growth, people are going to like. If you don't have that revenue, but you have some great validation from the users, you can put the quotes, you can put the stars that they're putting in. This is an example from a B2B SaaS space where there is a quote, a couple of different numbers, but also then, logos of the brands. Alternatively, you can also show that people are really using the product. So in this case, It's a marketing tech company where one of the key reasons investors these days don't want to invest in a marketing tech space is because they believe solutions are not mission critical. So we are turning it around. We're saying the product is extremely sticky. 90% of users use it every month. 85% active users. And this is mission critical. Again, similar example, right? Just facts and stuff. This is an example, again, back from that deck that raised 4 million without having any traction. And at the point when they raised this round, they didn't even have an MVP. They didn't even have a solution. They literally had a couple of Figma screens around how the MVP is going to look like. And this is the slide that they used. They basically just say, look, the demand is proven, right? We don't have any other traction. But what we've done the homework. We've done 200 broker interviews. 90% admitted to having the pain. 60% plus are prepared to pay for this more than for their current CRM solution. We recruited 15 alpha customers. You can also convert it into pipeline. And then you have all of these amazing quotes on the right. That what has to do with the traction slide. Now, getting to GTM and business model slide. Again, I think the key is, when does this look bad? When your GTM is essentially just your marketing strategy or generic channels, or where instead of the business model, you have this detailed price sheet, or you have, we're going to have 10 different revenue streams. And you're like, yes, people are going to invest because I have a marketplace revenue and SaaS revenue and data revenue and advertising revenue. Don't focus on anything that's non-core. No one wants to know in pre-seed stage that somewhere in 3 years, you're going to be able to charge people money for data or advertising. That comes with scale. Instead, focus on things that are clear, that have clear numbers, data, have clear unit economics, give investors strategic insight into your growth strategy and execution. And most importantly, why this is going to work, why this is going to win, why your go-to-market strategy is better than that of your competition. Some of the example of bad slides, right? This is about nothing, essentially. This is the same. This is just marketing plan, like influencers, social media, word of mouth. Everybody is doing that. An example of business model slide. I mean, doesn't really matter, right? Like if people want to know the pricing, they're going to ask about it, or they're going to go on your website, they're going to see that. Don't waste your time for that. Example of the slide that has 6 different revenue streams, from products to e-commerce platform to retail kiosks. No one is ever going to finance it. It just looks way too complex and impossible to execute on. An example of the good slide. We have a good, robust, and data-driven growth strategy. Paid social, earned media, influencers, and each of this has specific validation points. An example of the simple but good business model slide. Today, we're free, and we have a paid tier. Next, we're going to add this, and then later, we're going to build a marketplace. Simple, easy to read. Alternative, if we just have a simple subscription fee, we can show how this business model works to get it to, let's say, 150 million of revenue. So we're charging $18 today. Our customers on average live for 10 months. We only need 250K monthly users to get to 150 million in revenue. And that's only 0.7% of our TAM and only a 2x higher than our current revenue base. So that makes the math super simple and intuitive. A good example of a wordy go-to-market slide, but that worked well. This is our strategy, and it's supplemented with our AI sales agent. And what it gives us is CAC and demos at scale. And you use some numbers, right? Like 55% conversion rate or 1,000 signups generated with less than 4K in marketing spend. So again, you provide the data to show that this is working. Another good example from, I think this is a Series B deck that ended up being successful. What do? We have a SaaS model. It's focused on large enterprises. Our ICP is Fortune 1,500 with 1 billion plus in revenue. Our ACV is 145K. And we have a predictable sales organization to get this to market. 6 months to close, 45% plus close rate, 4 million in the pipeline. Basically just 5 numbers, but a slide that really sells this to investor that this is reliable. Alternative example of the business model where we say, look, this is how we monetize. We take 5% of top line revenue, and then we split charge for cross-sell and upsell items. And then the right, again, is that sales element. Our business model is quickly profitable and very lucrative in the long run. So we have LTV, we have show our CAC, 10x LTV CAC, payback time of 4 to 5 months. Again, we've definitely sold investor in the model. And this is example of the seed deck that ended up raising 1 million in Asia. Again, similar example, revenue streams, unit economics on the right, simple, easy, and quick to see. Team slide. I'm not going to dive a lot into the team slide. I think the general rules is ideally you don't put one person in there. No one likes a solo founders. You have to focus on your traction and achievement. So we'll get to that in a second. Ideally show founder market fit. If you have some nice logos to put on, always helps. I think advisors and mentors are probably people give them too much credit. They're less important than you think. The important bit is to showcase that you can do it. And this is a great example that somehow everyone is very humble. People prefer to put their bios and they say 10 years of experience in finance, went to University of Dukes and something else. People don't care about that. You have to think about truly your track record, right? So, and a good example is here, a bit exaggerating, but you can say I work at McDonald's, or you can say I have a part-time job in fast food, or you can say I handle transactions for a multi-billion-dollar company in the industry on a daily basis and help provide around 2 billion to the US economy each year. That's up to you, right? All of those are possibilities, but find a traction that works. This is a good example of the slide that I quickly sanitized, where you say, again, 10 years at Microsoft, expert in AI-driven platform, led transformative projects, and you have some facts down, like 15 years of experience, 3 exits. It's visual, it works well, has some nice logos. Alternatively, you've seen this slide already. I think the most important bit, if you go back to speed dating, if you only can, put forward the 3 most impressive facts about your professional entrepreneurial career, what would that be? Put that down and try to quantify it. Grew revenue from X to Y, grew the business from 0 to 1,000 users, whatever that can be. Almost final, do financials matter? Financial slide by statistics is the fastest skimmed one. And the better question is, do you even need it? This is the type of financial slides I normally deal with. And I can definitely tell you that slide is not needed. The problem with financial slides, if we go a step back, is that in 95% of the cases, the financial slide you're going to put down, even if it's not as dense as this one, is going to kill your fundraise. Because what this slide essentially tells me is that in 5 years, we're only going to get to 2 million revenue. So we've raised 2 million of investment and we've gotten to 2 million revenue. And obviously that just doesn't work, right? So with this one slide, even if your idea is great, maybe attraction is great, because you haven't developed a really good financial forecast, your chances to fundraise are killed. What would have happened if you didn't have financial slide? You might have converted the investor on the idea, and then investor likes it so much that when you show them this financials, he laughs at you and he says, look, dude, let's work it out together because your financials are stupid. This is another example, right? Like it doesn't necessarily work. Like this has irrelevant information. In this case, this again has weird growth plans. It doesn't actually work. This is a very common slide. It's actually not a bad slide as such, right? Visually, but again, you need to be very confident in what you're putting down and in the numbers that you're putting down. And in this case, the growth is just incredible. You're getting to all of this millions and millions of customers. This one, again, doesn't really work. No one looks at yearly return on investment if you're in the VC space. I don't recommend putting things like equity share or like profit share down. If you do want to have a slide with financials, this might work. So, right, like, for example, this is a SaaS platform that monetizes on doctors, sells solutions to doctors. So you're showing ARR, you're showing number of doctors, and you're showing a couple of key milestones. This is another example. Again, you're showing the profitability, you're showing the revenue, you're showing a couple of key metrics and how you're going to get there. So you're showing expansion drivers. Finally, the ask slide, one of our last slides. What you have to show is clear round milestones and where the money will go. You don't show valuation numbers because you're just making it too easy for investors to say no. Typically, that valuation number is too high or too low. You don't want your deck to be discarded purely because you've put that down. Leave that for your verbal discussion. Same with round conditions. I don't think you want to put down a generic pie chart. What you do want to put down is tangible goals for the next 12 to 18 months. So instead of doing this, right? And by the way, do avoid putting that, we need 80% of the round for salaries. Better divide those salaries. Like if it's product development, just do product development. If it's marketing salaries, do marketing. But, Don't say we need the money to pay ourselves. This is a good example, right? Like we need 2 million seed to get to 4 million GMV in 18 months. So you're super concrete, and this is where you're going to spend it. We're going to build Creator Academy. We're going to do onboard food suppliers. We're going to build out automation tools, very specific. Again, this one, like raising 15 million, round goal, runway for 25 months, very specific. Finally, we haven't covered this, but don't forget the vision slide if you can. I think the pitch needs to excite investors. They need to see that there is a much broader play versus what you're building today, and they need to buy in on that big vision. So you need to make sure to articulate it really well. It can be something like this, right? We're going from world's largest B2B marketplace to healthcare supply chain OS. This is how it's going to be year-wise and geographies-wise. It can be something like this in terms of features. This is what we build today. Tomorrow, we're going to be this end-to-end solution, and these are things we're going to add. Or it can be like this, just very visual, right? We're building the world's supply chain graph, and this is what we're going to do. Whatever that is, remember that the deck is just a starting point. You need to get your story tight. And even then, when you're done, you're probably just 10% done. Now the hard work is going to start, right? You need to outreach to investors, and you need to build relationships early. Really, the trick about fundraising successfully is about having people who are going to listen to you and try to understand you. So building that relationship, building the round starts, well, now. Or if you've just raised, it starts the next day. You need to raise fast. The average successful raises are now down in under 12 weeks. If you are fundraising for longer, it's probably not going to happen. And what you need to do is go back to building. And that's the final most important bit. You need to build, build, and build. Don't wait for money, because the more validation you do, the higher are the chances of successful fundraise. So essentially build, and investors going to come. For more insights on how to do that other 90%, we have a fundraising in 2025 webinar. So that's a wrap, almost. How we can help, add me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to chat and connect with fellow founders. We have Fundraising Copilot. We've done a 60% discount off for the next 24 hours. That's where you can get access to the other webinars. You can also get access to library of slides from successful fundraising, VC contacts, and some of the templates. So we've sanitized some of the decks and converted them into templates, and you can download them there as well. And we also do pitch deck and modeling support. So stuff like free pitch deck reviews, free modeling reviews, help around pitch deck story, content, and modeling. So if you're fundraising right now and you think you need help with the pitch deck, always happy to help with that as well. So thank you. That's a wrap. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to get to questions. So give me a second to scroll up. Okay, loads of stuff in there. Guys, I'm aware that some of you need to jump off. I'm going to try to cover all of the questions. And then if you're interested to see how your question was answered, you can just come back to the recording, which we're going to share after this one, and you can review what I answered. So that's in a nutshell. Okay. Scrolling down. Scrolling down. In the meantime, add more questions if you have any. I love that people are connecting here and potentially seeing value. So that is awesome. Okay. Okay, project app. Don't necessarily see questions yet. Okay, someone asked if we receive a recording. Yes, you will receive a recording. Someone is raising 30 million at an idea stage. I can tell you that it's extremely difficult. There are people who've done it, but I think my experience and our experience, and we've seen loads, like over 100 raises just last year alone. You can raise in pre-seed stage, at the idea stage, you can raise 4 to 5 million without having a product, if a team is really good. If people are excited about your team, if you have previous exits, or if you have some early indication of great traction, you can raise 4 to 5 million. In all the other cases, you probably are looking to raise 1 to 2 million. There is one exception. We worked with a company that ended up raising at an idea stage 100 million. So it's 3 times more than I think Vasquez is raising here. But the reason they raised it is because they've signed an LOI with a hospital that essentially said that as soon as the solution is built, they're gonna, sorry, not with the hospital, with an insurance provider that's gonna roll it out to all of their hospitals that they're working with. So that was instantly over 100 million LOI in essence, right? So once the solution is built, we're rolling it out to everyone we know. That's when they raised 100 million. I think 30 million without anything else, without having is going to be difficult. It's true for some of the deep tech startups. So I think at an idea stage, we work with a startup that raised 45 million. We work with one that raised 30 million, but they did a lot of R&D. They did a lot of development already, even though they didn't have anything live. So that's reality today. But don't get discouraged. Everyone can be the first. So okay. Let's go to see if there is anything else. Okay, we have people actively selling in this chat. That's super interesting. I do have to say, someone is raising a point here that decks rarely matter, and it's more around the connections, and that's very true. So like relationships matter loads. Okay, thank you, everyone. Understand some of the people are dropping. Okay, yes, questions are in another tab. Found it now, thank you. How about showing the deck? And they ask, how would make you unique? What makes you the team to solve the problem? I think ideally, talk to your personal experiences. Ideally, talk to, you need to know why you're unique to solve this. I think my recommendation is, if you don't have anything, then speak about your speed of execution. So if there is nothing that makes you unique, say that we're confident we can execute really fast because of something we've done in the past. We've executed from X to Y. We are the team. Maybe you have the connections. Maybe you have the network. Those are the typical things that get people excited. From my experience, what's the best number of slides for the deck? I think most standard people are rolling with 15. I think 20 is too much. I think 10 sometimes is too little to be able to articulate everything you want to say. So somewhere around 15 is the most standard. Okay, someone here is raising funds through equity crowdfunding. Should the pitch deck be the same or different in key points compared to the one for VC investors? So I think the points are fairly different. So if you're raising from your customers, for example, so if you're going crowdfunding, then normally you would focus a little bit less on things like TAM, SAM, SOM. They wouldn't care about. They just want to know the opportunity is large. The language typically would be a little bit simpler. So the story is the same, but not all of the slides are needed. Not all of them are needed in exactly the same order. If you're raising from private equity or family offices, again, the story is typically similar, but normally, for example, private equity would care more about you getting to profitability and scale really fast versus you having this amazing AI technology. So there is semantics that affects, and you need to think about your end audience and the story you're telling them. What's the most important aspect to consider when working on raising funds for a B2B project located in Africa? I would need to know what the B2B project is and the industry, but generally, I don't think location matters. It always comes back to the traction. So you need to make sure that the solution that you're doing is validated as much as possible. You need to move the needle on traction as much as possible. And you need to engage with investors early on. Even if you don't have anything yet, you can reach out to investors locally. You can say, we're planning to fundraise soon. We're really excited about potentially partnering up with you. What are you looking for? What are the conditions in which you would be interested in investing? Listen to what they're saying, and that's your roadmap. Someone here wants to start a company, a telecom company in the US, in talks with Qualcomm and Nokia. Okay, interesting. Would I be able to raise pre-seed at the idea stage? Yes, especially if you're having some of those conversations are a little bit more quantified, you would be able to. I have to say, I've seen both. So if the team doesn't raise super loads of confidence, then investors typically say, we're going to wait until LOI. We want to see something in terms of revenue. If the team inspires confidence and you've met the right investor, then sometimes they're comfortable giving you money at the idea stage as well. Okay, someone, Naina here, is hiring co-founders. Candidates are from major companies. Okay, what are the key priorities to think about when getting your team together? I think the key priority is, don't think about how it's going to look on paper. You are marrying. Like it's literally, I think, easier to get a divorce than to get rid of the co-founder. I've heard loads of and lived through loads of crazy stories where a choice of a co-founder can entirely kill the business. So the most important thing is find a person that complements you in terms of skills and that you feel comfortable working with. Once that is done, let's assume you have 10 people like that. Who should be next on your list? I'd say it's someone who has a good track record of executing. I don't think like just purely being from a company helps. So I work with someone from IBM and they've had 30 years of experience in IBM, and eventually we parted ways because they were absolutely helpless and useless. And I'd rather work with someone who came from a startup but can execute really fast. So you need to think about not investment here, but the execution in terms of the startup. But in terms of what looks good for the investors, the highest up is if they have raised money from VCs before, scaled the VC company, and especially done an exit. Next to that would probably be a good, well-recognizable logo, for example, in your space. Maybe that's healthcare, or maybe that's telecommunications, or maybe that's B2B SaaS, and a position of something where you've done something. You went into new markets, you scaled the revenue from X to Y, etc. And then everything else after. So if it's neither that nor that, then it doesn't really matter. What to do with a team that's novice, first-time entrepreneurs, fresh out of university? Look, I work with a company, two guys from a university. They've launched this AI tool for AI detection in text, and they got to 8 million in revenue, 40% EBITDA. They're still in uni. I think they're deciding to drop off. Investors are chasing them. So the fact that you're a novice doesn't mean that you can't build something kick-ass. The focus is, most importantly, try to validate the solution, get the traction, build, and then investors are going to come. There is actually a fund done by, I think, Tony VC guy that are launching the fund for founders who are under 25, straight out of uni, looking for that talent. So I don't think there are a lot of investors who like that kind of talent. If you are straight out of uni, if you're super eager, but again, it comes down to, have you built something that's interesting? Have you found an interesting angle? Have you found have you validated your idea, etc. Okay. Final, I think, almost final. What's your opinion in citing the numbers given in the slide? So even if good slides don't have justification, like 60% time spent on art. I think generally you need the citations. Generally, no one asks you about them. So you just need to make sure that's confident, like you have that information, right? So if it's like 60%, if you don't have a citation through that, but you've been in that industry and you've experienced that, that's fine. If it's a number that came from your user interviews, that's fine. You don't need a citation for that. If it's a number that comes broadly from your head, better not put it down. So I think you can get away with some level of, this is what I'm aware of, or this is what I've experienced, and it doesn't necessarily need to have a source if a number is compelling. Okay, what's the most important thing for pre-seed stage style decks, especially without a rockstar team and little traction? Position the traction is as good of a way as possible. Position a team in as good a way as possible, and then make sure people understand the problem is really large. And I think highlight your execution. If you have a great execution plan, for example, we go to companies who already shown interest, and these companies are going to advertise us for free and include us in their newsletter. And this is how we're going to get to scale. And then the way that we build the product is going to be highly shareable, and every user is going to bring another 2 users. So focus on execution then, and just well-rounded story around why this is going to work. Okay, I think I've covered practically all of the questions. Thank you guys very much for attending. Really appreciate all of your time, and join us for other webinars. Thank you very much. Have a great day, evening ahead.